The sky was barely awake when my phone rang. The gentle waves of Savannah Beach had been my only companions that morning as I stood with my toes buried in the cool sand. The vibration against my hip felt like an intrusion from another world, a world I had temporarily escaped. I glanced at the screen, Raymond, building security. My heart knew before my mind could process it. This was the call I had been waiting for, the call William had predicted would come. Mrs. Carter. Good morning, Raymond. You're up early. The calmness in my voice surprised even me. Mrs. Carter, I'm sorry to disturb you, but your daughter-in-law is here with a lawyer. She says she's the new owner and is requesting we change the locks to your apartment. I watched a seagull dive into the ocean, emerging with a small fish struggling in its beak. Nature has its own way of teaching us about predators. Raymond let them in. I paused, feeling the weight of William's wedding ring against my chest. I've been preparing for this moment for a very long time. The sun began to peek over the horizon, painting the sky in shades of gold and amber. I twisted William's ring between my fingers and whispered, "Just as you predicted, my love." My name is Evelyn Carter. I am 67 years old, and this is the story of how I outsmarted the people who tried to erase me. The ocean has always reminded me of William, vast, deep, and constant. We stood on this very beach 45 years ago as newlyweds. He had just passed the bar exam, and I had completed my first year as a high school English teacher. The Magnolia Heights apartment in Atlanta was his wedding gift to me. "A place worthy of my queen," he had said, presenting the keys with a flourish that made me laugh and cry simultaneously. William rose to become a Superior Court judge respected and feared for his unwavering commitment to justice. I became the first Black woman to serve as principal at Westfield High School. Together, we built a life of purpose, dignity, and carefully cultivated respect. The display cabinet in our living room holds our history. My grandmother's handcrafted quilt from Reconstruction-era Georgia, William's first gavel, the program from the ceremony where I was named Georgia's Educator of the Year, photographs of civil rights leaders who dined at our table. Each item carries stories that shaped who we are, who I am. Who I was trying to remember I still am, even as others tried to convince me I was less. William's cancer diagnosis came like a thief in the night. Pancreatic, stage 4. 6 months, the doctor said, avoiding our eyes. We got 2 years instead. William fought like the warrior he had always been, but even warriors eventually lay down their swords. It was during those final months that James brought Vanessa into our lives. My son, my only child who had spent his entire life trying to measure up to his father's towering legacy. James, with his perpetual sense of inadequacy, despite his Harvard MBA and position at a prestigious investment firm. James, who had always chosen glamour over substance, appearance over reality. Vanessa embodied everything James thought he wanted. Former model, 20 years his junior. The kind of beauty that turns heads and photographs well for Instagram. They met at a charity gala while William was undergoing his 3rd round of chemotherapy. Their whirlwind romance culminated in a rushed wedding 1 month before William took his final breath. I remember the way William looked at her from his hospital bed when they announced their engagement. His eyes still sharp despite the morphine narrowed slightly. He had spent decades reading people in his courtroom. He knew. The night before he died, William asked the nurse to leave us alone. His hand, once strong enough to split firewood, now felt like paper in mine. "Evelyn," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "The safe in my office. There's a letter. Read it after I'm gone." "William, save your strength," I urged, but he squeezed my hand with surprising firmness. "Promise me." "I promise." His eyes bore into mine with an intensity that transcended his failing body. "I don't trust her, and neither should you." 3 days after William's funeral, while James and Vanessa were meeting with the caterer for the reception they insisted on hosting, I opened William's safe. The antique grandfather clock in the hallway, William's pride and joy, ticked steadily as I entered the combination. 07-12-54, our wedding date. Inside was an envelope with my name written in William's distinctive handwriting. Next to it sat a flash drive, a small notebook, and a business card for someone named Diana Lopez, private investigator. My hands trembled as I opened the letter. My dearest Evelyn, if you're reading this, I've left this world before I was ready to leave you. Know that loving you has been the greatest privilege of my life. I've spent my career reading people, and I've learned to trust my instincts. Something about Vanessa troubles me deeply. After our first meeting, I hired Diana Lopez to look into her background. What she uncovered confirms my suspicions. Vanessa has been involved in 2 previous cases of estate manipulation. In both instances, she formed relationships with wealthy older men, isolated them from family, and attempted to redirect their assets. Neither case went to court. Settlements were reached privately, but the pattern is unmistakable. I fear she sees James as her path to our assets, and once I'm gone, you may become her primary obstacle. I've taken steps to protect you and our legacy. The flash drive contains all of Diana's findings, plus a copy of our updated estate plan. The notebook details the security measures I've implemented, including a separate account only you can access. You may think I'm being paranoid. I pray that's the case. Prepare for the worst while hoping for the best. That's how I've approached every trial, and life's greatest challenges are no different. Remember who you are, Evelyn. You possess more strength, intelligence, and determination than anyone I've ever known. Don't let anyone, not even our son, convince you otherwise. All my love, eternally. William. I read the letter 3 times each reading, sending a deeper chill through my body. My first instinct was denial. William was wrong. James would never allow anyone to harm me. Vanessa's interest in our family had to be genuine. Yet as I sat in William's leather chair, surrounded by his law books, and the faint scent of his sandalwood cologne, doubt crept in. William had rarely been wrong about people, and the Vanessa he described matched subtle behaviors I had observed but dismissed. The way she examined our possessions when she thought no one was watching. How she referred to eventually updating our home while William was still alive. Her persistent questions about William's will and our finances disguised as concern. The grandfather clock chimed, startling me from my thoughts. Each resonant bell seemed to echo William's warning. I slipped the letter and flash drive into my pocket. Whether William was right or wrong, I would be prepared. I would watch. I would wait. I would protect what we had built. Prepare for the worst, hope for the best, I whispered to the empty room. I didn't have to wait long for the first signs. 6 months after we laid William to rest, the suggestions began. Casual at first, then increasingly persistent. Evelyn, have you considered Magnolia Sunset Village? It's that lovely retirement community near Piedmont Park. Vanessa mentioned over Sunday dinner, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness. They have the most wonderful activities for seniors. James nodded enthusiastically. Mom, you'd love it there. And this apartment is so large for just one person. All these stairs can't be good for you at your age. My age, I repeated, setting down my fork. I'm 67, James, not 97. I still swim 30 laps 3 times a week. Vanessa reached across the table to pat my hand. The gesture felt patronizing. Of course you do, and that's wonderful. They have an Olympic-sized pool at Magnolia Sunset. How thoughtful of you to research that, I said, maintaining my pleasant smile while gently pulling my hand away. The following week, I found a glossy brochure for Magnolia Sunset Village on my coffee table. I hadn't placed it there. Then came the medical concerns. Mom, have you been to Dr. Richards lately? Dad would want us to make sure you're taking care of yourself, James said one evening when he stopped by unexpectedly. I had my annual physical last month. Perfect health as always. But what about your memory? I noticed you called me David the other day. That's Uncle David's name. His tone was gentle but probing. I frowned. I did no such thing, James. See, you don't even remember doing it, he said, exchanging a meaningful look with Vanessa, who had been silently observing our exchange from the doorway. The incident never happened. I knew it with absolute certainty. But the seed of doubt had been planted not in my mind, but in the narrative they were constructing around me. The pivotal moment came 3 weeks later. I returned from my book club to find my apartment door slightly ajar. Voices drifted from inside James and Vanessa, unaware of my early return. The appraiser said we could get at least $3 million for this place, maybe more, Vanessa was saying. "Once we get her signature on these papers, we can move forward." "I still don't feel right about this." James sounded uncertain. "She loves this apartment. Dad bought it for her." "James, be realistic. She can't manage on her own much longer. Remember how she left the stove on last week? Another fabrication. I hadn't used the stove that day. I'd had dinner with Eleanor." "I know, but your father would want us to take care of her. This is taking care of her. Besides, think of what we could do with that money. Your investment opportunity won't wait forever." I silently backed away from the door and pressed the elevator button. When the doors opened, I stepped inside and descended to the lobby, my mind racing. I waited 15 minutes before returning, making sure to announce my arrival loudly. That night, after they left, I searched my home office. In the decorative box where I kept personal documents, I found a folder that hadn't been there before. Inside were papers regarding a capacity evaluation for Evelyn Washington Carter, along with transfer of property forms awaiting my signature. My hands shook, but not from fear, from anger. William had been right. I sat in his chair again, running my fingers over the worn leather armrests. "You warned me," I whispered to the empty room. "Now what would you advise me to do, Judge Carter?" The answer came in the memory of his voice during a long-ago conversation. "Evidence, Evelyn. The truth means nothing without evidence." The next morning, I called Eleanor Washington, my oldest friend and William's former law school classmate. Over coffee in her office, never my apartment, never anywhere that might be observed, I showed her the documents. Eleanor's expression darkened as she examined them. "This is elder abuse, Evelyn, financial exploitation. We need to act quickly but carefully." William left me a file on Vanessa. He suspected something like this might happen. Eleanor wasn't surprised. William always was 10 steps ahead of everyone else. What did he find? I told her about Vanessa's previous involvement with wealthy older men and the suspicious settlements. "That establishes a pattern." Eleanor nodded. "But we need more current evidence. I recommend security cameras in your apartment, discreet ones." "Isn't that illegal?" "Not in your own home. Georgia is a one-party consent state for recordings. As long as you know they're there, it's perfectly legal." She leaned forward, her eyes serious. "And Evelyn, as difficult as this might be, I think you should play along somewhat. Act a little more confused than you are. Give them enough rope to hang themselves." The suggestion made my stomach turn. Pretend to be losing my faculties, become the stereotype of a doddering old woman. "I know it goes against everything you are, but if they believe their plan is working, they'll get careless. We need them to reveal their full intentions." I thought of the dignity I had fought for my entire life, the respect I had earned through decades of hard work. The idea of pretending to be diminished felt like betrayal of everything I stood for. But then I remembered William's face in that hospital bed, his concern not for himself as he faced death, but for me facing what would come after. "I'll do what's necessary," I finally said, "but on my terms." The security cameras were installed the following week, tiny, unobtrusive devices hidden in bookshelves, picture frames, and light fixtures. Eleanor's son, who ran a cybersecurity firm, set up the system so I could monitor everything from my phone. My performance began subtly, small signs that could be attributed to age or grief, misplacing my reading glasses, forgetting to return phone calls, wearing mismatched earrings to dinner with James and Vanessa. Each mistake was carefully calculated, never too obvious, never endangering myself or others, just enough to feed the narrative they were constructing. The most difficult part was keeping my true self hidden from the world. Only Eleanor knew the full truth. I stopped meeting friends for our regular lunches, fearful they would either see through my act or, worse, believe it was real. The isolation was perhaps the cruelest aspect of my plan. But isolation, I discovered, also brought clarity. With each passing week, the evidence mounted. The cameras captured Vanessa, exploring my closets, examining my jewelry, and once attempting to open William's safe. James appeared less frequently, and when he did, his discomfort was palpable. During one visit, I pretended to doze off and heard Vanessa whisper to him, "The doctor said these episodes would increase. We need to move forward with the paperwork before she has a lucid day and changes her mind." The most revealing moment came when my granddaughter Olivia visited. James's daughter from his first marriage, 16 years old, and possessing her grandfather's perceptive eyes. Vanessa hadn't expected her that weekend, a scheduling oversight that visibly annoyed her. Olivia and I had always been close bonded by our shared love of history and music. While Vanessa was occupied with a phone call in another room, Olivia helped me prepare tea in the kitchen. "Grandma," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "What's going on? Dad and Vanessa have been talking about you moving. They said you're getting confused a lot." I measured my response carefully. Olivia was perceptive, but she was still a child caught between the adults in her life. "Sometimes people see what they expect to see," I said quietly. "How are things at home, sweetheart?" Olivia glanced toward the doorway. "Weird. Vanessa acts different when Dad isn't around. Last week I came home early from soccer and found her going through your old photos, the ones from the civil rights marches. She was putting some aside." My heart clenched. Those photographs documented my involvement in historical moments, marching alongside giants whose shoulders we all stand upon today. They were irreplaceable. "She said she was organizing them," Olivia continued, "but when I asked which ones she was keeping, she got really angry, said I was snooping." "Olivia," I said, keeping my voice low, "I need you to promise me something. If you ever see anything that doesn't feel right, will you call me, no matter what time, no matter what it is?" She nodded solemnly, her young face serious beyond her years. "Is something bad happening, Grandma?" The kettle whistled, giving me a moment to compose my response. "Knowledge is power, Olivia. Your grandfather taught me that. Right now, I'm gathering knowledge." Vanessa appeared in the doorway. "What are you two whispering about?" "Family history." I smiled, my expression placid, as I poured hot water into the teapot. I was telling Olivia about her great-grandmother's journey from Alabama to Atlanta during the Great Migration. Vanessa's interest evaporated instantly. "James wants to leave in 20 minutes, Olivia. Don't make us wait." After they left, I went to the cabinet where those photographs were stored. Several were indeed missing, those featuring me alongside prominent civil rights leaders. Photos that established my mental acuity and social significance during historical events. Photos that contradicted the narrative of a declining elderly woman. That night, I slipped my grandmother's jade bracelet onto my wrist, a piece that had traveled with her from rural Georgia to Atlanta during harder times when Black women had even fewer protections than I faced now. Its weight against my skin reminded me of the generations of women whose strength flowed in my veins. The next morning, I made a decision. If James and Vanessa wanted to see a confused old woman losing her grip, I would give them one while simultaneously setting a trap they wouldn't see until it snapped shut around them. I invited them for dinner, preparing William's favorite pot roast. Throughout the evening, I sprinkled my conversation with small inconsistencies. Called James by his father's name once. Mentioned appointments that didn't exist. Asked Vanessa the same question twice. With each slip, I watched their reactions. James showed genuine concern that couldn't quite mask his guilt. Vanessa's eyes gleamed with poorly concealed satisfaction. As we finished dessert, peach cobbler, another of William's favorites, the doorbell rang. "Are you expecting someone, Mom?" James asked. "Oh, that must be Dr. Morris. I completely forgot he was stopping by." Of course I had planned this coincidence meticulously. Vanessa straightened, exchanging a quick glance with James. "Dr. Morris." "Yes, a friend of James's recommended him. Such a kind man to check on me in the evening." I opened the door to reveal a distinguished-looking man in his 60s. "Dr. Morris, please come in. We were just finishing dessert, Doctor." Albert Morris entered with the confident air of a man accustomed to respect. "Mrs. Carter, thank you for having me. I apologize for the intrusion." "Not at all. You remember my son James and his wife Vanessa?" Dr. Morris nodded professionally, though of course he had never met them. He was actually Professor Morris, a colleague from my days in education administration, now retired, and happy to play along with my charade. "Would you like some coffee, Dr. Morris?" I asked, deliberately dropping a spoon as I turned toward the kitchen. "Allow me," Vanessa said quickly, retrieving the spoon. Her smile was solicitous, her eyes calculating. Throughout Dr. Morris's visit, I alternated between perfect lucidity and moments of apparent confusion. At one point, after a particularly convincing display of disorientation about what day it was, I suddenly quoted Shakespeare flawlessly, "Age cannot wither her, nor custom stale her infinite variety." Antony and Cleopatra. Act 2, Scene 2. My students always found it ironic that a man wrote those words about a powerful, aging woman. I smiled at Dr. Morris. "Wouldn't you agree, Doctor?" The momentary flash of uncertainty on Vanessa's face was worth every uncomfortable moment of my performance. After Dr. Morris left, promising to follow up soon, Vanessa seemed unable to contain herself. "He seems very knowledgeable. How did you say you found him?" "I believe he's a colleague of Dr. Richards." I said, vaguely referring to my regular physician. James's friend recommended him. I purposely created a contradiction to see if they would notice. They didn't. They were too focused on their objective to pay attention to the details, a critical mistake in any courtroom, as William would have noted. The following morning, my security cameras captured Vanessa on the phone in my kitchen, while James helped me sort through some books in the study. "She's definitely declining faster," Vanessa whispered. "Last night was the most confused I've seen her. Yes, the doctor was there. No, she has no idea. We need those papers prepared by next week." That evening, alone in my apartment, I called Eleanor. "They're accelerating their timeline," I told her. "We need to move forward with our plan." "Are you sure you're ready?" Eleanor asked. "This will be difficult, Evelyn, emotionally taxing." I touched William's ring, which I now wore on a chain around my neck rather than on my finger, a symbolic shift from wife to warrior. "I'm ready," I said firmly. "It's time to set the trap." The next day, I announced my decision to take a final vacation to Savannah, the place where William and I had honeymooned, the place where I had always felt most connected to him. "I've been feeling so disoriented lately," I told James and Vanessa with just the right touch of frailty in my voice. "Before things get worse, I want to see the ocean one more time, to say goodbye to William properly." Vanessa could barely contain her enthusiasm. "What a wonderful idea! How long were you thinking of staying?" 2 weeks, perhaps. The Ocean View Hotel has availability starting this weekend." "This weekend? That's perfect timing," Vanessa said, then caught herself. "I mean, the weather should be lovely." James looked uncomfortable but nodded. "If that's what you want, Mom, I think Dad would like that." "I've already made the reservations," I said. "I'll leave Saturday morning." As they prepared to leave, I hugged Olivia tightly. "Remember what we talked about," I whispered. "Call me any time." She squeezed back, slipping something into my pocket. Later, I discovered it was a small notebook with her phone number and email address along with a coded message, "Seagulls fly at dawn," our private signal that it was safe to communicate. Before departing for Savannah, I visited Raymond, the building security guard who had worked at Magnolia Heights since before William and I moved in. William had helped Raymond win a civil case against a former employer years ago, earning his unwavering loyalty. I handed Raymond a sealed envelope. "If anyone comes asking about me or trying to access my apartment while I'm gone, call me immediately, then open this." Raymond nodded solemnly. "You can count on me, Mrs. Carter. Judge Carter was good to me and my family. I won't forget that." The drive to Savannah brought unexpected peace. As the landscape changed from Atlanta's urban sprawl to Georgia's coastal plains, I felt the weight of my performance lifting. For 2 hours, I could simply be myself, Evelyn Carter, widow, educator, survivor. Not the confused elderly woman I had been pretending to be. The Ocean View Hotel held memories in every corner. William and I had stayed there 4 decades earlier, young and in love, full of dreams for our future. Now I returned alone, carrying the wisdom of years and the weight of betrayal. The hotel manager, Gloria Robinson, greeted me personally. Gloria and I had attended Spelman College together, though we had lost touch until reconnecting at our 30-year reunion. "Everything is arranged as we discussed," she murmured as she escorted me to my oceanfront room. "The room is registered under the name you provided, and any inquiries about Evelyn Carter will be met with confirmation of your stay, nothing more." "Thank you, Gloria. I appreciate your discretion." After what you told me, discretion is the least I can offer." She squeezed my hand. William was always good at reading people. If he suspected something, there was usually something to suspect. That first night in Savannah, I stood on the balcony watching the ocean. The rhythmic crash of waves against the shore reminded me of the grandfather clock in our apartment, constant, predictable marking time until justice would be served. My phone chimed with an alert from the security system. James and Vanessa had entered my apartment less than 5 hours after I had left Atlanta. The cameras captured them methodically going through my belongings, opening drawers, examining documents. "She keeps most of the important papers in William's office," James was saying, leading Vanessa to the room I had purposely left unlocked. "What about the safe?" Vanessa asked. "I don't know the combination. Dad never shared it with me." Vanessa looked directly at the hidden camera, though of course she didn't know it was there. Her expression was cold, calculating nothing like the warm, concerned daughter-in-law she pretended to be in my presence. "We need to get into that safe before she comes back," she said. "There has to be a way." And I watched them move through the spaces William and I had shared, touching our memories, evaluating our possessions. The violation was profound, but so was the evidence they were unwittingly providing. The next day my phone lit up with another alert. This time Vanessa had returned with a man I didn't recognize. They were measuring the rooms, discussing updates and modernization. "Once we clear out all this dated furniture, the place will sell quickly," the man said, gesturing dismissively at the antique writing desk where William had drafted his most important opinions. "We need to be ready to move fast after next week," Vanessa replied. "Once the papers are signed, we want to list it immediately." My heart raced, but not with fear, with certainty. Every word they spoke was being recorded, documented, preserved as evidence of their intentions. That evening, Olivia texted using our code, "Seagulls flying everywhere. V went through your jewelry box today. Looking for something specific." I knew exactly what Vanessa was searching for: the key to William's safe. What she didn't know was that I had taken it with me, along with the most important documents and irreplaceable family treasures. On the third day of my vacation, Eleanor called with news. "Evelyn, we have a situation. I've been monitoring the court filings as we discussed. Vanessa has submitted a petition for guardianship, claiming you're no longer competent to manage your affairs." Despite expecting this, the words still stung. "On what grounds?" "She's included statements from a Dr. Jerome Morris, not your Dr. Morris, obviously claiming he's observed significant cognitive decline. The petition states you've become a danger to yourself, citing incidents of leaving the stove on, wandering confused in the building, and making irrational financial decisions." "All fabricated," I said firmly. "Of course, but they're moving faster than we anticipated. The hearing is scheduled for next Monday." 5 days from now, that's unusually quick." "It seems Dr. Morris has connections at the courthouse, but so do we. Sarah Jenkins owes William her career. She's the judge assigned to the case." Sarah Jenkins. William had mentored her decades ago, championing her appointment to the bench when few black women served as judges. "Does she know what's happening?" "Not the details, but she's agreed to meet with us privately before the hearing. Judicial ethics still apply, but she's concerned about anything involving William's family." "When?" "Tomorrow in her chambers. Can you get back to Atlanta without James or Vanessa knowing? I thought of the cameras in my apartment still recording their activities in my absence." "Yes, but I want them to believe I'm still in Savannah until the last possible moment." That night, I stood on the beach watching the stars reflect on the water. The same stars that had witnessed William and me exchange vows all those years ago. The same ocean that had carried the whispered dreams of generations before us. "Give me strength," I murmured, not sure if I was speaking to William, to God, or to the countless ancestors whose blood and determination had made my life possible. As if in answer, my grandmother's jade bracelet seemed to warm against my skin. The weight of William's ring pressed against my heart. I was not alone in this fight. I never had been. The next morning I left a "Do Not Disturb" sign on my hotel room door and slipped out before dawn. Gloria had arranged for a private car to take me back to Atlanta, where Eleanor would be waiting. As we drove away from Savannah, I received another alert from my security system. Vanessa was in my apartment again this time, examining the lock on William's safe. The trap was set, the evidence gathered. In 3 days, they would make their move, believing me vulnerable and alone in Savannah, but I would be waiting, and I would be ready. Just as the car merged onto the highway toward Atlanta, Raymond's call came through, the call that would begin the final act of this painful drama. "Mrs. Carter, it's Raymond from Building Security. Your daughter-in-law is here with some people. She says she's the new owner of your apartment." "Thank you, Raymond," I replied, my voice steady despite the surge of anger and anticipation. "Let them in. She's about to get a surprise." The highway stretched before me like a ribbon of possibilities as we sped toward Atlanta. Each mile marker counted down to confrontation. Each passing minute brought me closer to reclaiming my truth. Eleanor had arranged for us to meet at her brownstone in Inman Park, safely away from prying eyes at Magnolia Heights. I watched Georgia's landscape transform through the car window, the coastal plains giving way to rolling hills. My phone buzzed with updates from the security cameras in my apartment. Vanessa was becoming bolder, bringing in more people, a locksmith examining my front door, an interior designer taking photos of William's study, a man in an expensive suit appraising our artwork. My artwork. "Mrs. Carter," my driver said, glancing at me in the rearview mirror. "Are you all right? You seem tense." I realized my hands were clenched into fists, knuckles white against the jade bracelet. I consciously relaxed them, smoothing imaginary wrinkles from my dress. "I'm fine, thank you, just eager to reach our destination. We'll be there in about an hour, traffic permitting." An hour until I stepped back into the battle. An hour to prepare myself for what lay ahead. I closed my eyes not to sleep, but to center myself. William had taught me this technique during his most challenging cases. "The calm mind sees what others miss," he would say. My phone rang, Olivia's ringtone breaking my meditation. "Grandma," she whispered, her voice barely audible, "Vanessa brought someone to look at your jewelry today. She told Dad it was for insurance purposes, but I heard her tell the man which pieces were most valuable for quick sale." My hand instinctively went to William's ring hanging from the chain around my neck. "Thank you for letting me know, sweetheart. Are you safe?" "Yes, I'm at Mom's this week, but I'm worried about what's happening." "Trust me, Olivia. Everything will be resolved soon. Just keep your eyes open and stay in touch." "I will. I love you, Grandma." "I love you too, more than you can possibly know." After we disconnected, I received a text from Eleanor. "Judge Jenkins confirmed, meeting at 3 p.m. today." The pieces were falling into place. Judge Sarah Jenkins had been one of William's brightest protégés. As a young law clerk, she had shown such promise that William had personally recommended her for her first judicial appointment. Now, 20 years later, she served on the same court where William had dispensed justice for decades. When we finally arrived at Eleanor's brownstone, she was waiting on the porch. At 70, Eleanor Washington remained a formidable presence, tall, elegant, with silver locks framing a face that had argued before the Supreme Court 3 times and won each case. "You made good time," she said, embracing me. "Sarah is expecting us at 3. That gives us 2 hours to prepare." Inside, Eleanor had transformed her dining room into a war room. Laptops displayed feeds from my apartment's security cameras. Printouts of legal documents covered the table. A whiteboard outlined our strategy in Eleanor's precise handwriting. "They've accelerated their timeline," Eleanor explained, pointing to court filings displayed on one screen. "Vanessa filed for emergency guardianship yesterday, claiming you've become increasingly erratic and potentially dangerous to yourself. She's seeking temporary control of all your assets pending a full competency hearing." "On what grounds?" "Allegedly, you left the gas stove on overnight, wandered the building in your nightclothes, confused about where you were, and have been giving away valuable items to strangers." "All fabrications." "Of course, but they've found a doctor willing to support these claims, Dr. Jerome Morris. He claims to have conducted a home evaluation at James and Vanessa's request and found you showing signs of moderate cognitive decline." "I've never met any Dr. Jerome Morris." "Exactly," Eleanor nodded grimly. "But he exists. I had my paralegal check his credentials. He's a real psychiatrist with a spotty ethical history. 2 complaints for questionable evaluations in elder cases, both settled quietly. Connected to Vanessa somehow. We're still digging, but possibly. The more immediate concern is the emergency hearing scheduled for tomorrow morning. Tomorrow, that's unusually fast. Someone pulled strings, but so have we. Sarah can't ethically discuss a case before her, but she agreed to meet us for general guidance on elder law issues. It's a fine line, but one we can work with. I sank into a chair, suddenly feeling the weight of the journey and the battle ahead. What about James? Is he fully part of this? Eleanor's expression softened. The filings have both their signatures, but the security footage shows he's less involved in the day-to-day activities. Vanessa appears to be the driving force. He's always been easily influenced, I said, unable to keep the disappointment from my voice. William worried about that his entire life. Speaking of William, Eleanor said, sliding a folder toward me. I had an interesting conversation with Diana Lopez yesterday. William's investigator. Yes, she's been monitoring Vanessa's activities as we requested. Vanessa has made 3 visits to a high-end auction house in the past week. She's been discussing potential estate liquidation, specifically mentioning your African art collection and William's first edition law books. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. William had spent decades curating that collection. Rare texts on civil rights law first editions, signed by legal pioneers, volumes that documented the struggle for justice in this country. And my art collection represented years of supporting emerging Black artists' pieces whose value lay as much in their cultural significance as their monetary worth. They're not just after the apartment, I said slowly. They want everything. It appears so, but this overreach will be their downfall. We spent the next hour reviewing our evidence and refining our strategy. Eleanor had prepared a devastating countermove, an injunction against Vanessa based on attempted elder exploitation, backed by the security footage, witness statements from Raymond and others, and William's investigative file. At precisely 2:30, we left for the courthouse. Eleanor drove navigating Atlanta's midday traffic with the same confidence she navigated complex legal matters. Remember, she cautioned as we parked, Sarah cannot explicitly advise us on your specific case. We're seeking general guidance only. I understand the dance, I assured her. William and I attended enough judicial functions to know how these conversations work. Judge Sarah Jenkins's chambers reflected her personality, meticulously organized, yet warmly decorated with artwork by Black Southern artists. A framed photograph of her with William at her investiture ceremony sat prominently on her desk. Mrs. Carter, she said, rising to embrace me, it's been too long. Judge Carter is still deeply missed in these halls. Thank you, Sarah. He would be proud of all you've accomplished. Sarah gestured for us to sit. I understand you have some questions about elder law procedures. Before we begin, I should clarify that I cannot discuss any specific matters that might come before me. Of course, Eleanor nodded. We're simply seeking clarification on procedural matters. For the next 45 minutes, we engaged in a carefully choreographed conversation. Sarah hypothetically outlined what evidence would be compelling in guardianship challenges. She, generally speaking, explained how courts viewed hidden camera evidence in one's own home. She mentioned recent cases where emergency guardianship petitions had been dismissed due to procedural overreach. Never once did she acknowledge that Vanessa's petition was on her docket. Never once did she explicitly advise us on our strategy. Yet when we left, both Eleanor and I felt significantly more confident. She can't show favoritism, Eleanor said as we walked back to the car, but she gave us what we needed. William always said she was brilliant at navigating difficult waters. Indeed. Now let's prepare for tomorrow. I suggest you stay with me tonight rather than risk being seen at a hotel. Agreed, but first I need to check on something at the apartment. Eleanor looked alarmed. That's too dangerous. If Vanessa or James sees you. They won't. Raymond will let me in through the service entrance. There's something in the safe I need before tomorrow. After considerable debate, Eleanor reluctantly agreed, but insisted on accompanying me. As the sun began to set over Atlanta's skyline, we parked 3 blocks from Magnolia Heights and walked the rest of the way, taking a circuitous route to avoid being spotted. Raymond was waiting at the service entrance as promised. Mrs. Carter, he said with obvious relief. Everything's ready as you requested. Your apartment is empty right now. They left about an hour ago, but the gentleman from the locksmith company said they'd be back first thing tomorrow to complete the job. Thank you, Raymond. We won't be long. We took the service elevator to my floor. The hallway was deserted as Raymond unlocked the fire stairs door, allowing us to approach my apartment from the opposite direction of the main elevators. Entering my home felt surreal. Everything looked the same, yet fundamentally different, violated by unwelcome hands, examined by calculating eyes. On my security tablet, I reviewed the day's footage. Vanessa had brought 5 different people through my home, each evaluating some aspect of my life for liquidation. "We need to hurry," Eleanor urged. "What are we looking for?" I moved directly to William's study and the antique grandfather clock that had been his pride and joy. Opening the clock face, I reached inside and pressed a hidden mechanism. The back panel of the clock swung open, revealing a secondary compartment behind the pendulum. William believed in contingency plans, I explained, removing a slim metal case. This was his ultimate fallback position. Inside the case were documents I had never expected to need. A second set of our estate planning documents with additional provisions, notarized affidavits regarding Vanessa's background signed by Diana Lopez, and a handwritten letter from William to any judge who might preside over a dispute. "William prepared all this before he died?" Eleanor asked, examining the documents with professional admiration. "He suspected something might happen. I thought he was being paranoid." I shook my head, still coming to terms with my husband's foresight. "There's one more thing." From the same compartment, I removed a small digital recorder. William recorded his final thoughts about James Vanessa and his concerns. He was a judge. He knew the power of hearing someone's actual voice expressing their clear wishes. Eleanor's eyes widened. This could be decisive. That was William's intention. We gathered everything and prepared to leave, but as I took one last look around the apartment, potentially my final view of it if things went wrong tomorrow, a sound from the hallway froze us in place. Keys jingling. Voices. "They're back," Eleanor whispered urgently. Raymond had said they wouldn't return until tomorrow, but plans had clearly changed. We had seconds to decide what to do. "The guest bedroom closet," I whispered. "It connects to the bathroom ventilation shaft." We slipped into the closet just as the front door opened. Through the slats, I could see Vanessa entering with a man I didn't recognize. James followed, looking uncomfortable. "We shouldn't be here, Vanessa," James was saying. "Mom could call at any time. How would we explain this?" "Relax," Vanessa replied dismissively. "She's in Savannah, probably asleep already. Mr. Donovan needs to see the safe tonight if we want everything ready for after the hearing." The man, presumably Mr. Donovan, was carrying a small bag of tools. "These old Jefferson models are tricky, but not impossible. You said the owner has early-stage dementia. She won't remember the combination." "She can barely remember what day it is," Vanessa said smoothly. "We're just trying to protect her assets before she gives everything away or gets scammed." I felt Eleanor's hand tighten on my arm, whether in restraint or support I couldn't tell. We watched through the closet slats as they moved toward William's study and the safe hidden behind his law school diploma. "This shouldn't take long," Donovan said, kneeling before the safe. "Combination locks from this era have predictable patterns." James lingered in the doorway, visibly distressed. "Vanessa, I'm not sure about this. Dad was very clear that his personal papers were private." "Your father isn't here anymore, James," Vanessa snapped, "and your mother isn't capable of managing these affairs. We're doing what's necessary. Unless you want to lose everything to her confusion." James fell silent, but his body language spoke volumes. Shoulders slumped, eyes downcast, the posture of a man who knew he was crossing a line but lacked the courage to stop. For 20 minutes, we remained motionless in the closet as Donovan worked on the safe. I could have given them the combination, let them discover that the safe was now empty except for documents I had deliberately left as decoys. But revealing ourselves would destroy our advantage for tomorrow's hearing. Finally, Donovan sat back on his heels. "I can't do it tonight. These old Jeffersons have secondary pins that need special tools I don't have with me. I can come back tomorrow with better equipment." Vanessa's frustration was palpable. "We need those documents before the hearing." "The hearing is just a formality," Donovan assured her. "My wife works for Judge Brennan's clerk. These guardianship petitions almost always go through on the first round, especially with medical testimony. You'll have legal control by noon tomorrow." My blood ran cold. They had expected Judge Brennan, known for his rubber stamp approach to guardianship petitions. They had no idea Sarah Jenkins had been assigned to the case instead. "Fine," Vanessa sighed. "Come back first thing tomorrow. We need to be ready to move quickly once we have control." As they prepared to leave, James paused in the living room, looking at a family photograph from my 60th birthday. His expression was haunted. "James, come on," Vanessa called from the door. "She looks so happy here," he said quietly. "So, present." "That was years ago," Vanessa replied impatiently. "Things change. People decline. It's sad but natural." After they left, Eleanor and I waited 10 full minutes before emerging from our hiding place. My legs were stiff, my body tense from the prolonged stillness, but my mind was remarkably clear. "They've rigged the system," Eleanor said, her voice tight with controlled anger, "trying to ensure a favorable judge." "But they failed," I reminded her. "Sarah has the case, not Brennan." "True, but this confirms they have connections in the courthouse. We need to be extremely careful." We left, as we had entered through the service stairs and back door, with Raymond keeping watch. Once safely back in Eleanor's car, I finally allowed myself a deep, shuddering breath. "Are you all right?" Eleanor asked gently. "I just watched my son attempt to rob me of my dignity, my home, and my independence," I said. "No, Eleanor, I am not all right, but I will be." That night in the guest bedroom of Eleanor's brownstone sleep eluded me. I laid awake thinking of James as a child, his gap-toothed smile when he lost his first tooth, his proud stance in his Little League uniform, his tears when his first pet died. Where had that sensitive boy gone? How had he become this weak man who stood by while his wife plotted against his mother? William's ring felt heavy against my chest. "You were right to worry about him," I whispered to the darkness, "but I never thought it would come to this." Around 3 in the morning, my phone lit up with a text from Olivia. "Dad and Vanessa fighting. Heard your name. Something happening tomorrow." I replied carefully. "Everything is fine. Focus on school tomorrow. I'll explain soon." I didn't want her caught in the crossfire of what was to come. She was just 16, too young to bear the weight of adult betrayals, yet she had become my unexpected ally, my eyes and ears when I most needed them. Like the grandmothers before me who had relied on their granddaughters to carry forward their wisdom, I found myself entrusting Olivia with pieces of truth no one else could safeguard. At dawn, I rose and prepared myself for battle. I chose my outfit with strategic precision, a tailored navy suit that William had always said gave me an air of authority, my grandmother's jade bracelet, and William's judicial watch on my wrist, rather than his ring around my neck. Today wasn't about grief or remembrance. It was about power and presence. Eleanor had assembled a small but formidable team at her dining table for our final briefing. Diana Lopez, whose investigation had uncovered Vanessa's pattern of targeting wealthy older individuals. Dr. Albert Morris, the real one who had conducted a genuine cognitive assessment just 3 days earlier. Raymond, who would testify about his observations over the past months. And Sarah's former clerk, now in private practice, who understood her judicial approach better than anyone. "The hearing is at 10, Eleanor said, reviewing our timeline. "Vanessa and James believe you're still in Savannah. They'll be shocked when you appear. That moment of surprise is valuable. It immediately undermines their narrative of your confusion." "What about Dr. Morris?" I asked. "The real one." "He'll testify immediately after their Dr. Morris. The contrast will be striking, a thorough, proper evaluation versus a cursory, predetermined conclusion." Diana Lopez, a compact woman with shrewd eyes, outlined what she had uncovered. "Vanessa has done this before, though never at this scale. Twice, she formed relationships with older men with significant assets. Both relationships ended with private settlements after she began maneuvering for control of their finances. In one case, she married the man just 3 months before he died of cancer. The pattern was so clear it almost took my breath away, history repeating itself with James and me as the new targets. "What about their claim that I've been giving away valuables?" I asked. "Raymond can testify that no unusual deliveries or visitors have been observed," Eleanor explained, "and your bank records show no unusual withdrawals or transfers." By 9:30 we were in position at the courthouse. Eleanor had arranged for me to enter through a judge's private entrance, avoiding the main hallways where we might encounter James and Vanessa prematurely. We waited in a small conference room adjacent to the courtroom, monitoring the arrivals through the clerk's updates. At 9:50, the clerk texted, "Petitioners have arrived with counsel and doctor." At 9:55, Judge Jenkins has reviewed the filings and is ready to proceed. At 9:59, Eleanor squeezed my hand. "Ready." I nodded, smoothing my jacket and straightening my shoulders. William once told me that in his courtroom, truth always recognized itself. Let's see if he was right. We entered the courtroom through the side door, typically used by court personnel. The first person I saw was Judge Sarah Jenkins, resplendent in her judicial robes, her expression deliberately neutral as she reviewed documents before her. Then I saw James and Vanessa seated at the petitioner's table with their attorney, a sharp-featured man in an expensive suit. Next to them sat a thin, nervous-looking man I assumed was the fraudulent Dr. Morris. They hadn't noticed me yet. James was staring at his hands. Vanessa was whispering urgently to their lawyer. The courtroom was otherwise empty. They had requested a closed hearing, another tactical move to minimize scrutiny. As Eleanor and I moved toward the respondent's table, the click of my heels against the marble floor finally drew their attention. James looked up first, his face draining of color as he registered my presence. He reached blindly for Vanessa's arm, his mouth forming a silent, "Mom." Vanessa turned, her practiced composure cracking momentarily before she mastered herself. The flash of naked panic in her eyes was quickly replaced by a calculating assessment of this unexpected development. Their attorney recovered first. "Your Honor, we were not informed that the respondent would be present. Given her condition, we had not expected—" "My condition?" I interrupted, my voice clear and strong in the hushed courtroom. "Please do elaborate on my condition that you've diagnosed without ever meeting me." Judge Jenkins tapped her gavel once. "We will maintain order. Ms. Washington, I understand you're representing Mrs. Carter." "Yes, Your Honor," Eleanor replied, "and we have several motions to present before these proceedings continue." "Objection!" the opposing counsel sputtered. "This is an emergency guardianship hearing. Mrs. Carter was not expected to defend herself," Judge Jenkins finished for him. "Mr. Harrington, in my courtroom, we do not proceed with determining a person's competency without their presence unless absolutely impossible. Mrs. Carter is clearly here and appears capable of participating. We will proceed appropriately." Vanessa leaned forward, whispering frantically to her attorney. James remained frozen, his eyes fixed on me with a mixture of shame and disbelief. "Your Honor," Eleanor began. "Before we proceed, we move to dismiss this petition on multiple grounds. First, fraudulent claims regarding Mrs. Carter's cognitive state. Second, evidence of conspiracy to commit elder exploitation. And third, submission of falsified medical evaluations." She placed a thick binder of evidence before the judge. "We have extensive documentation supporting each claim, including video evidence from Mrs. Carter's apartment, showing the petitioners planning to liquidate her assets before any determination of her competency." Judge Jenkins raised an eyebrow. "Video evidence from the apartment." "Yes, Your Honor. Mrs. Carter installed security cameras in her own residence after becoming suspicious of unusual activities. Georgia being a one-party consent state, these recordings are fully admissible." Vanessa's face had gone from confident to ashen. James looked physically ill. "Furthermore," Eleanor continued relentlessly, "we have evidence that the medical evaluation submitted by Dr. Jerome Morris was conducted without ever meeting Mrs. Carter in person. Dr. Morris has a history of questionable evaluations in elder cases, and we have reason to believe his relationship with Mrs. Vanessa Carter predates this case." "Doctor." Morris shifted uncomfortably in his seat, suddenly very interested in his shoes. "These are serious allegations." Judge Jenkins noted her expression grave. "Mr. Harrington, how do you respond?" The attorney looked desperately toward Vanessa, who had composed herself and was whispering instructions. "Your Honor," he began, "we vigorously dispute these characterizations. Our petition was filed out of genuine concern for Mrs. Carter's well-being. If she has been manipulated into opposing this action—" Manipulated. I could no longer remain silent. I have been a high school principal for 20 years and a district superintendent for 10 more. I have managed budgets, personnel, and the education of thousands of children. The suggestion that I am being manipulated is not just false, it's insulting. Judge Jenkins turned to me directly. "Mrs. Carter, while I understand your frustration, we must follow procedure. Would you be willing to undergo an independent cognitive evaluation to resolve this matter?" "Your Honor," Eleanor interjected, "we have anticipated this question and have brought Dr. Albert Morris, no relation to the other Dr. Morris, who conducted a full evaluation of Mrs. Carter 3 days ago. His report is included in our evidence packet. Dr. Morris is present and available to testify." Judge Jenkins examined the report, then looked at me over her reading glasses. "Mrs. Carter, you seem to have been several steps ahead in this matter." "I had an excellent teacher in my husband, Your Honor. He always said that justice requires preparation." Something like approval flickered in Sarah's eyes before her judicial mask returned. "Indeed. Well, given the serious nature of the allegations on both sides, I believe we need to examine the evidence thoroughly. Mr. Harrington, are your clients prepared to respond to the evidence presented, particularly the video recordings?" Before the attorney could answer, Vanessa stood abruptly. "This is ridiculous. She's clearly been coached by her attorney. Just a month ago, she couldn't remember her own address." "Ms. Carter, please sit down," Judge Jenkins ordered. "You will have an opportunity to present your case." "Your Honor," I said quietly, "may I address the court directly?" After a moment's consideration, Sarah nodded. "Briefly, Mrs. Carter." I turned slightly, facing both the judge and my son. Vanessa I deliberately ignored. She was not the heart of my pain, merely its instrument. For 45 years I was married to Judge William Carter. He taught me that our legal system, despite its flaws, ultimately seeks truth. When William was dying, he warned me that something like this might happen. I didn't believe him. I couldn't imagine my own son would participate in an attempt to declare me incompetent for financial gain. James flinched visibly, his eyes dropping to the table. "I am not confused. I am not incompetent. I am, however, deeply disappointed. But I am also my husband's widow, and he taught me to fight for what is right. That is what I am doing today, not just for myself, but for every older person who faces erasure and exploitation at the hands of those who should protect them." The courtroom fell silent when I finished. Even Vanessa had no immediate retort. Judge Jenkins surveyed the scene, her expression unreadable. Then she tapped her gavel once decisively. "We will take a 30-minute recess. When we return, we will review the video evidence. After that, I will determine how to proceed." As the judge exited to her chambers, the emotional temperature in the room shifted palpably. Vanessa immediately huddled with her attorney, their whispered conversation intense and urgent. James sat motionless, still unable to meet my eyes. Eleanor squeezed my hand under the table. "Well done," she whispered. "Sarah is giving them time to reconsider their position." "Will they?" "Vanessa won't, but James might, and that could change everything." As if on cue, James suddenly stood and walked toward our table. Vanessa hissed something at him, but he ignored her, approaching me with the hesitant steps of a man walking into uncertain territory. "Mom," he began, his voice barely audible, "I never meant for this to—" His words trailed off as he struggled to find the right explanation, the right excuse, the right anything to make sense of what he had done. I waited, saying nothing, my expression neither accusing nor forgiving. "She said you were confused," he finally continued, "that you needed protection. I was worried about you. After Dad died, you seemed so lost." "Lost is not the same as incompetent, James," he nodded miserably. "I know. I let things get out of control." "And the apartment, the art collection, my jewelry, were those also for my protection?" He had no answer for that, his silence more damning than any explanation could have been. "James!" Vanessa called sharply from across the room. "We need to talk. Now." He hesitated, caught between his wife's demand and whatever remnant of conscience had driven him to approach me. "You have a choice to make," I told him quietly. "Not just about today, but about who you are, who you want to be. Your father always believed you had it in you to do the right thing, even when it was difficult." Something flickered in his eyes, a memory perhaps of the father whose approval he had craved and rarely felt he received. "He did, always," I confirmed. "The question is whether you believe it yourself." James looked over his shoulder at Vanessa, then back at me. The battle within him was visible on his face, the path of least resistance versus the harder road of integrity. "I need to think," he mumbled, retreating to a corner of the courtroom away from both tables. Eleanor leaned close. "He's wavering. That's good for us." "It's not about winning, Eleanor. It's about saving what can be saved." She regarded me with a mixture of exasperation and admiration. "Even now you're thinking like a mother. I'll always be his mother. That doesn't mean I'll allow him to take advantage of me. But if there's a path to redemption, I won't block it." When Judge Jenkins returned to the bench, the atmosphere had shifted once again. James had rejoined Vanessa, but sat slightly apart, his body language closed and uncertain. "Before we proceed with the evidence review," Judge Jenkins announced, "I understand the petitioners wish to address the court." Mr. Harrington stood. "Yes, Your Honor. After consultation with my clients, we wish to withdraw our petition for emergency guardianship." A murmur of surprise escaped me, despite my efforts to remain composed. Eleanor's hand found mine again, squeezing in silent triumph. Judge Jenkins's expression remained neutral. "Mr. Harrington, while the court acknowledges your request to withdraw, given the serious counter-allegations of attempted exploitation, we cannot simply dismiss this matter. Mrs. Washington, does your client wish to pursue her claims against the petitioners?" Eleanor and I had discussed this possibility. The evidence we had gathered could potentially lead to criminal charges against Vanessa and possibly James. The question was whether justice required that level of consequence. Eleanor looked to me for the final decision. I thought of William, of what he might advise in this moment. Justice, yes, but also wisdom. Consequences, but also compassion where warranted. I stood to address the court myself. "Your Honor, I am prepared to forego criminal charges under certain conditions." Judge Jenkins nodded. "Please proceed, Mrs. Carter." I looked directly at James and Vanessa as I outlined my terms. First, a restraining order preventing Vanessa Carter from entering my home or contacting me in any way. Second, my son James will seek appropriate counseling for the issues that led him to participate in this scheme. Third, a formal acknowledgement of my competency to be entered into the record, preventing any future attempts at guardianship without substantial new evidence. Judge Jenkins considered my requests. "These seem reasonable given the circumstances. Mr. Harrington, do your clients agree to these terms?" After a hurried consultation, the attorney nodded reluctantly. "Yes, Your Honor." "Very well. I will prepare the appropriate orders. This matter is adjourned with the court retaining jurisdiction to enforce the agreed-upon terms." As the gavel fell, I felt a curious mixture of victory and sadness. I had won, but at what cost? My relationship with my son lay in ruins. The trust that forms the foundation of family had been shattered. Vanessa stormed out of the courtroom without a backward glance, Mr. Harrington trailing behind. James lingered, clearly wanting to speak, but uncertain how to begin. "James," I said, gesturing to the now empty bench beside me. "Sit with me a moment." He hesitated, then complied, leaving a careful distance between us. "I didn't know how far she would go," he said finally. "It started small, concerns about your memory suggestions about downsizing. Then suddenly we were filing papers and hiring doctors. And you went along with it." "I was weak. I've always been weak compared to Dad, compared to you." I studied my son's face, the features so like William's, yet softer, somehow less defined. "Weakness isn't permanent, James. It's a choice you make each day with each decision." "I don't know if Vanessa and I will survive this," he admitted. "That's for you to decide. But remember, true strength isn't found in controlling others. It's found in mastering yourself." He nodded slowly, absorbing the words. "I am sorry, Mom. Truly." "I know. But trust once broken must be rebuilt brick by brick. We have a long road ahead of us." As James left the courtroom, Eleanor returned from speaking with the clerk. "It's over," she said. "Sarah is expediting the orders. By this afternoon, you'll be legally protected." "It doesn't feel over," I admitted. "It feels like the beginning of something else entirely. Healing takes time. Justice is just the first step." Outside the courthouse, the Atlanta sun blazed in a clear autumn sky. I tilted my face upward, letting the warmth wash over me. William had always said that truth like the sun can be temporarily obscured but never extinguished. "Where to now?" Eleanor asked as we approached her car. "Magnolia Heights," I replied without hesitation. "I need to go home." As we drove through Atlanta's midday traffic, my phone chimed with a text from Olivia. "Dad just called Mom. He sounds really upset. Are you okay?" I smiled at my granddaughter's concern. "Everything is fine. I'll explain when I see you. Perhaps you could come for dinner this weekend." Her reply came instantly. "Yes, can't wait." Eleanor glanced over at me. "Your granddaughter." "Yes. She was my unexpected ally through all of this, like you. William would be proud of how you handled today." I touched his ring now back around my neck where it belonged. He knew. Somehow he knew this day would come. He was a judge, Evelyn. He spent decades observing human behavior at its worst, and he loved you enough to prepare you for what he feared might happen. As Magnolia Heights came into view, I felt a surge of emotion. This was my home, my sanctuary, the place where William and I had built our life together. No one would take it from me, not through deception, not through legal maneuvering, not through exploiting the very age that had given me the wisdom to fight back. Raymond was waiting at the entrance, his face breaking into a broad smile when he saw me. "Mrs. Carter, it's good to have you home." "Thank you, Raymond, for everything." "Judge Carter always said to look out for you. I was just keeping my promise." As the elevator carried us upward, I thought about promises. Those William had made to me, those I had made to him, and the ones I now made to myself. To remain vigilant, to protect what we had built, to honor his legacy by living with the same courage and integrity he had shown throughout his life. When the doors opened on my floor, I stepped out with my head high, Eleanor at my side. The hallway stretched before me, not a path to confrontation this time, but a return to rightful place, to home. I had faced the threat and prevailed. But as I approached my door, I knew this victory was just the beginning. The real work, healing the fractured relationships, rebuilding trust, creating safeguards for others who might face similar exploitation, lay ahead, and I was ready for it. Raymond stepped aside as I entered my apartment, the familiar space now infused with new meaning. The scent of lemon polish mingled with the subtle notes of William's books, smells of home, of sanctuary reclaimed. I ran my fingertips along the credenza, where generations of family photos stood, each frame a testament to lives lived with purpose. "They had a locksmith here yesterday," Raymond said, offering me a new set of keys. I insisted on having copies made immediately. Building policy, I told them. He winked his small act of rebellion, a reminder that allies sometimes appear in unexpected places. Eleanor surveyed the apartment with her lawyer's scrutiny. "Would you like me to stay, help you settle back in?" I shook my head. "I need to reacquaint myself with these walls alone, to reclaim what's mine." After Eleanor left with promises to call later, I wandered from room to room, not merely checking for disturbances, but reconnecting with the space that held 45 years of memories. This wasn't just property Vanessa had coveted. It was the physical embodiment of a life William and I had built together. In William's study, I stood before the grandfather clock, the guardian of our most precious secrets. Its steady tick-tock echoed through the silent apartment like a heartbeat restored. I carefully returned the documents from the hidden compartment to their rightful place, sealing away evidence that had saved my autonomy. The victory felt substantial, yet incomplete. I had won the battle, but something deeper remained unresolved. I removed William's ring from the chain around my neck and held it in my palm. For months after his death, I'd worn it as a talisman of grief. Now it represented something different, a transition from mourning to mission. "The work isn't finished," I whispered to the empty room. My phone chimed a message from Olivia. "Grandma, are you home? Dad's being weird. Says he needs to talk to me about important stuff. What happened?" I smiled at her perceptiveness. Even at 16, she sensed the seismic shifts in our family dynamic. "I'm home. Everything is all right. Your father has some thinking to do. We'll talk this weekend." That evening, preparing dinner felt like a ritual of reclamation. Each vegetable I chopped, each spice I measured represented normalcy returned. I set the table for one, a habit from decades of family dinners not easily broken. The quiet felt peaceful rather than lonely, a space for reflection rather than isolation. As I savored my meal, my mind turned not to the past, but to the future. William had always taught that personal trauma should be transformed into communal benefit. The most important question after injustice, he often said, is not why me, but what now? By morning, purpose crystallized. Over coffee, I began sketching plans for what would become the Magnolia Heights Senior Protection Initiative. My years as an educator had taught me that systemic change required structure, strategy, and sustainability. This wouldn't be a passion project born of anger, but a deliberate response to a need I now understood intimately. Around noon, my phone lit up with a text from James. "May I see you alone? There are things that need saying." My finger hovered over the screen. Was I ready? The wound was fresh, the betrayal still raw. Yet closure required confrontation, and healing couldn't begin without acknowledgement. "Yes," I replied simply. 3 p.m. The hours until his arrival seemed to stretch endlessly. I rehearsed what I might say, then reminded myself of William's judicial wisdom. Listen first, then speak. When the doorbell rang, Raymond had already called up to announce James's arrival, another small reminder of the protections now firmly in place. The man who stood in my doorway barely resembled the son I knew. James looked diminished somehow, shoulders slumped, eyes shadowed with exhaustion. The confident investment manager had vanished, replaced by someone confronting his own weakness for perhaps the first time. "Mom," he said simply. "James." I stepped aside to let him enter. We moved to the living room, taking positions that felt more like opponents in negotiation than mother and son me in my armchair, him perched tentatively on the edge of the sofa. "I filed for separation this morning," he began. No preamble. "Vanessa's gone." The statement hung in the air between us, not what I'd expected. "That wasn't my objective, James." "I know." He looked down at his hands. "But it was necessary. When I returned home after the hearing, she was already packing only her things. She had a contingency plan all along." His bitter laugh held no humor. "When I confronted her, she didn't even deny anything. Just said I was too weak to seize opportunities, and she wasn't going down with me." The cruelty of her assessment clearly stung him. Despite everything, my maternal instinct sparked compassion. "I'm sorry you're hurting." "Don't be. It's the wake-up call I've needed for years." He leaned forward, hands clasped so tightly the knuckles whitened. "I've spent my life taking the path of least resistance. With Dad, with my career choices, with my marriages. Vanessa saw that weakness and exploited it beautifully. His self-awareness surprised me. Your father worried about that tendency in you." "I know. I found his letters to me, the ones I never opened in his desk after he died." James's voice caught. He tried to warn me about the difference between ambition and integrity. I wasn't ready to hear it then. This was new information letters William had written to our son that James had ignored. Another layer to the complex relationship between father and son that I hadn't fully understood. "What did they say?" I asked gently. That I needed to find my own definition of strength, not chase someone else's. That he saw me choosing partners who decided things for me because I was afraid of making the wrong choice. James looked up, his eyes damp. He knew me better than I knew myself. William was perceptive about people. It made him an excellent judge. And a father I could never please. The old resentment surfaced briefly. At least that's what I thought. But his letters weren't disappointed, Mom. They were worried. He saw me heading for exactly this kind of disaster. I allowed silence to fill the space between us, giving him room to continue his painful self-examination. "I can't undo what I did," he finally said. "I betrayed you. I betrayed Dad's memory. Everything I was raised to believe about loyalty and integrity, I threw it all away because I was too weak to stand up to Vanessa." His voice broke. "I'm not asking for forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I need you to know that I see myself clearly now, and I hate what I see." The raw anguish in his expression reminded me so much of William in his rare moments of self-doubt that my carefully maintained composure wavered. "James," I said carefully, "what you did was wrong, profoundly wrong. But who you become after this mistake is what matters now. Your father believed in redemption, not the easy kind that comes with mere apologies, but the hard-earned kind that requires action and change. I don't know how to make this right. Start with honesty with yourself most of all. Continue with the counseling you agreed to in court. And perhaps most importantly, find a way to use this experience to help others avoid similar mistakes." He looked up, surprise evident. "You're giving me a path forward." "I'm giving you an opportunity to find your own path. What you do with it is your choice." We talked for another hour, excavating years of misunderstanding and avoidance. James spoke of growing up in William's formidable shadow of his belief that nothing he did would ever measure up. I shared perspectives he'd never considered his father's private worries, the pride William had felt but struggled to express. When James finally rose to leave, something had shifted between us. Not forgiveness exactly, that would take time, but the possibility of it. A door left ajar rather than slammed shut. "I'd like to help," he said at the threshold, "with whatever you're planning to do about elder exploitation. I have resources connections through the firm. Maybe I could be useful." "We'll see," I replied, neither accepting nor rejecting. One step at a time. After he left, I returned to my notes for the Senior Protection Initiative with renewed clarity. This wasn't just about protecting myself or helping anonymous seniors. It was about transforming a personal violation into a force for good that might even offer my son a path to redemption. The next morning, I called Eleanor to discuss the legal framework needed. "We need a proper structure," she advised, "a nonprofit with bylaws, board members, the works. This can't just be a passion project if you want lasting impact. I've never established a nonprofit before." "But you've run organizations, managed budgets, led teams. The principles are the same." She paused. "And I know several excellent nonprofit attorneys who can handle the paperwork. Sarah Jenkins has already expressed interest in being an advisory board member." The mention of Judge Jenkins surprised me. "She's willing to be publicly involved." "Within ethical boundaries, yes. What happened to you disturbed her deeply, not just personally because of her connection to William, but professionally. She's seen too many guardianship petitions rubber-stamped without proper scrutiny." By week's end, the basic framework was in place. I had drafted a mission statement, identified potential board members, and begun researching similar programs in other cities. What had begun as a response to personal trauma was evolving into something with potential for systemic change. On Saturday, Olivia arrived for our planned dinner, her energy a welcome contrast to the intensity of recent days. "Is it true Vanessa's gone?" she asked immediately, helping me prepare salad. "Dad's being super weird, keeps talking about making better choices and asking me about stuff we used to do before he married her." I measured my response carefully. "Your father is reassessing many things right now, including his priorities. He said he's taking a leave from work, that he wants to spend more time with me." She stopped slicing tomatoes knife suspended midair. "Is he having some kind of breakdown?" The question made me smile despite its seriousness. "Not a breakdown, Olivia. A breakthrough, perhaps. Sometimes people need a significant shock to see themselves clearly." She considered this, resuming her task with characteristic precision. "Like what almost happened to you." "Exactly." "Is that what your new project is about? Dad mentioned you're starting some organization." "Yes. Too many older adults are vulnerable to financial exploitation, often by family members who should be protecting them." Olivia's hands stilled again. "Can I help? I mean, I'm not a lawyer or anything, but maybe there's something I could do." Her offer, so earnest and unexpected, touched me deeply. Actually, there is. We need to reach younger people, too. Help them understand how to protect their grandparents. Recognize warning signs. A youth perspective would be invaluable. Her face brightened. I could start an Instagram, or maybe TikTok. That's where all the awareness campaigns happen now. The idea of the Magnolia Heights Senior Protection Initiative on TikTok was both amusing and intriguing. That's certainly something to consider. But first, let's focus on organizing these photographs as we discussed. After dinner, we spread decades of family photographs across the dining table. Images from civil rights marches where I had participated as a young teacher. William in his judicial robes, family celebrations, and quiet moments frozen in time. We should digitize these, Olivia suggested, holding up a photo of me standing alongside several civil rights leaders at a voter registration drive. This isn't just family history, Grandma, it's American history. Your grandfather would say exactly that. He always wanted these properly archived. He was right. This one belongs in a museum, she said, carefully examining another photograph, or at least a university collection. As we worked, Olivia asked unexpected questions about the events and people captured in the images. Her interest wasn't casual curiosity, but genuine engagement with history, her history, our country's history. You know, I said as we finished sorting the last batch, your grandfather saw something special in you from the beginning. Really, what? He said you had the heart of an advocate and the mind of a judge. Her eyes widened. He said that about me. He did. Recent events have proven him right. The following week brought unexpected momentum. Eleanor's contacts expedited the nonprofit paperwork, my former colleagues enthusiastically joined the cause, and community leaders began reaching out after hearing of our initiative. Most surprising was a call from Judge Sarah Jenkins. Mrs. Carter, I hope I'm not intruding. Not at all, Sarah, and please call me Evelyn. Evelyn, then. I've been following your progress with the initiative. It's exactly what our community needs. Thank you. We're still in the formative stages. That's actually why I'm calling. The Judicial Conference is planning educational sessions on recognizing elder exploitation in guardianship petitions. We need your perspective. Would you consider speaking? The invitation represented more than professional recognition. It was an opportunity to influence the very system that had nearly failed me. I would be honored. When is the conference? Next month in Savannah, ironically enough. The location made me smile. My interrupted vacation in Savannah had been the turning point in this journey, the place where I'd gathered strength before confronting the threat to my autonomy. Savannah seems appropriate. I have unfinished business with that city. As our conversation concluded, Sarah added, William would be proud, you know. This response turning personal injustice into systemic improvement, it's exactly what he believed in. I'm trying to honor his legacy the best way I know how. You're doing more than that. You're creating your own. After we disconnected, I sat with that thought. My own legacy. Not as William's widow or James's mother, but as Evelyn Carter in my own right. There was something profoundly liberating in that concept. 2 days later, an unexpected development jarred my newfound sense of purpose. Eleanor called, her voice tense. Vanessa's been spotted at the courthouse meeting with a different attorney. Diana's sources say she's considering a wrongful accusation countersuit. The news hit like a physical blow. Can she do that? After all the evidence. It would be frivolous, but that doesn't mean she won't try. Some lawyers will take any case if the client has money. Eleanor paused. And apparently she does. She's been seen with Carlton Reed. The name sent a chill through me. Carlton Reed was notorious in Atlanta legal circles, an aggressive litigator who specialized in scorched earth tactics regardless of case merit. What does this mean for us? Practically probably nothing. The evidence against her is overwhelming, but it could mean public accusations, attempts to damage your reputation, delay tactics. She wants to intimidate me into some kind of settlement. Most likely. I wanted you to be prepared. This kind of retaliation isn't uncommon when someone's scheme falls apart. After hanging up, I felt the weight of vigilance settle once more across my shoulders. The battle wasn't over. It had merely entered a new phase. I called Raymond to alert him about potential service of court papers, then updated my security protocols. That evening, as I reviewed the draft bylaws for the initiative, my doorbell rang. Through the security camera, I saw Dr. Albert Morris, the real one, standing in the hallway with a folder in hand. "Albert," I greeted him. "This is unexpected." "I hope I'm not intruding," he said, entering at my invitation. "I've been thinking about your project and wanted to share some research that might be helpful." Over tea, he explained his work on cognitive assessment for seniors. The problem with most competency evaluations is that they're binary. Either you're competent or you're not. Reality is far more nuanced. That matches my experience. I nodded. The fraudulent evaluation arranged for me portrayed me as globally incompetent based on fabricated incidents. Exactly. And even legitimate evaluations often fail to recognize that someone might need assistance in one domain while remaining perfectly capable in others. He opened his folder revealing academic papers and clinical guidelines. "I've been developing a more nuanced assessment protocol, one that respects autonomy while still providing necessary protections." His approach perfectly aligned with the initiative's core values. "This could be invaluable for our work, Albert. Would you consider joining our advisory board? We need this specialized expertise." "I'd be honored. In fact, I have several colleagues in geriatric psychiatry who might be interested as well." As our discussion continued, I realized we were building something potentially transformative, not just a reaction to personal experience, but a comprehensive approach to a widespread problem. The next morning brought another unexpected visit. Raymond called up to announce that a courier had delivered an envelope requiring my signature. When I opened it, I found not legal papers as feared, but an invitation to speak at a community center in a predominantly black neighborhood in southwest Atlanta. The director had heard about my experience through a former colleague and wanted me to share my story with their senior women's group. 3 days later, I found myself facing a room of about 30 women, most in their 60s and 70s. As I shared my experience anonymizing James while being candid about the exploitation attempt, I saw recognition in many faces. When I opened the floor for questions, hands shot up around the room. "My son's wife keeps suggesting I sell my house and move in with them," one woman said. "But that house is all I have. My husband and I paid it off 30 years ago. Is she trying to take advantage? My nephew became my power of attorney after my husband died," another offered. "Now he won't tell me how much is in my accounts, says I don't need to worry about it." Story after story emerged, some concerning, some innocent, all reflecting the vulnerability many seniors felt. I provided information resources and, most importantly, validation. Their concerns weren't paranoia. Their instincts deserved respect. By the end of the session, a sense of solidarity had developed in the room. Women exchanged phone numbers, promised to check on one another, and signed up for future workshops on financial literacy and legal protections. As I gathered my materials, an elderly woman approached, slowly leaning on a cane, her eyes bright and sharp in a face lined with experience fixed on mine. "You remind me of someone," she said. "Oh, who might that be?" "Myself 40 years ago. I was a teacher during integration, faced down people who thought I should be quiet and grateful instead of demanding justice." I smiled, recognizing a kindred spirit. Those battles never really end, do they? No child, they don't. They just change form. She patted my hand. "What you're doing here, it matters. More than you know." Her words stayed with me, reinforcing the importance of the work we had begun. This wasn't just about protecting assets. It was about preserving dignity, autonomy, and voice for an entire generation. That Sunday, I invited Eleanor Albert Raymond and several other key supporters to my apartment for a formal planning meeting. The dining room table, cleared of research materials for the occasion, was set with William's best china and food that would have made him proud. "Thank you all for coming," I began once everyone was seated. 6 weeks ago, I was fighting a personal battle against those who sought to declare me incompetent and take control of my assets. Today, we're launching an initiative that will help countless others facing similar threats. Around the table, heads nodded in solidarity. The Magnolia Heights Senior Protection Initiative has 3 primary goals, I continued. Education, intervention, and advocacy. We'll educate seniors and their families about exploitation risks. We'll create intervention protocols for professionals who interact with vulnerable elders. And we'll advocate for stronger legal protections at both local and state levels. For the next 2 hours, we refined plans, assigned responsibilities, and established timelines. The energy in the room was palpable, a collective commitment to transformation. As the meeting concluded, an unexpected visitor arrived. James stood in my doorway, uncertainty evident in his posture, but determination in his eyes. "I'm sorry to interrupt," he said, addressing the group. "I just wanted to drop off something that might be useful for the initiative." He handed me a flash drive. Financial data on settlement patterns in elder exploitation cases from the last 5 years. My firm compiled it for internal use, but I thought it might help identify vulnerable populations and target your educational efforts. The room had gone silent, everyone aware of the complicated history between us. Eleanor's expression was particularly guarded. "Thank you, James," I said carefully. "This could be very helpful." He nodded clearly, uncomfortable with the attention. "I should go. Let you continue your meeting." After he left, Eleanor raised an eyebrow. "Are you sure about that data?" "We'll verify everything, of course, but I believe he's sincere in wanting to help." "People can change," Raymond offered unexpectedly. "I've seen it in this building over 20 years. Not often, but it happens." As the others departed, I stood on my balcony watching the Atlanta skyline shimmer against the darkening sky. The city lights reflected the dual nature of human ambition, both constructive and destructive, depending on the heart behind it. My phone chimed with the text from Diana Lopez. "Urgent update. Vanessa dropped countersuit plans this morning. Source says Reed advised against it after reviewing evidence. She's selling Atlanta properties and leaving for Phoenix by end of month." Relief washed over me, not because I had feared the lawsuit, but because this chapter might truly be closing. I forwarded the message to Eleanor with a simple addition, "One less battle to fight." Her response came quickly. "More energy for the war. Sleep well, warrior." The next morning brought another text, this time from James. "Heard about the initiative meeting. Sorry for the awkward interruption. Meant what I said about wanting to help. Let me know when you're ready." I considered my response carefully. "Board meeting next Thursday, 2 p.m. Observer status for now." His reply was immediate. "I'll be there, thank you." Small steps, cautious rebuilding. The relationship would never be what it was before, but perhaps it could evolve into something more honest, more equal. That evening, Olivia called with unexpected news. "Grandma, my social studies teacher wants to make the Senior Protection Project an official school assignment. They want you to come speak to the class about elder exploitation and your organization." Her enthusiasm was contagious. "I'd be delighted. Just tell me when and where. And wait until you see what I've been working on." She sent a photo of herself wearing a t-shirt emblazoned with a stylized magnolia blossom and the words "dignity, security, respect" beneath it. I designed it for the youth advocacy branch we talked about. The initiative was taking shape in ways I hadn't anticipated, reaching younger generations, creating unexpected alliances, building bridges across age gaps that often seemed unbridgeable. The following week brought our first official board meeting as a legally recognized nonprofit. James attended as promised, sitting quietly at the back of the conference room Eleanor had arranged at her law firm. His presence was both challenging and hopeful, a reminder of betrayal, but also possibility. As we progressed through the agenda, I occasionally glanced his way. He was taking notes, his expression focused and thoughtful. When the meeting concluded, he approached hesitantly. "The framework you've created is impressive," he said, gesturing to the materials we had reviewed. "Comprehensive, but practical." "We have good people involved." "I can see that." He paused, gathering courage. "Mom, I've been thinking about how I could contribute meaningfully. Beyond just sharing data, I mean. My firm has connections with several major senior living corporations. They might be interested in implementing your protection protocols system-wide." The offer represented a significant opportunity for the initiative. Still caution prevailed. That would be valuable. Perhaps you could prepare a proposal for the next meeting. The board would need to approve any formal partnerships. He nodded, accepting the boundaries. Of course, I'll put something together. As he turned to leave, I added, James, Olivia tells me you've been spending more time with her lately. A genuine smile transformed his face. She's remarkable. Reminds me of you, actually. All that determination packed into a teenage frame. She speaks highly of you, too. Something unspoken passed between us. Not forgiveness exactly, but acknowledgement. Recognition that healing was possible, that relationships could be reconstructed different, but perhaps stronger for having been broken and mindfully repaired. 6 weeks after the court hearing, I returned to Savannah for the judicial conference. The trip felt like closing a circle, returning in triumph to the place where I had retreated to gather strength. The Ocean View Hotel welcomed me back this time as a featured speaker rather than a woman in hiding. Gloria Robinson greeted me with a warm embrace. "Look at you," she said admiringly, "from strategizing in secret to keynote speaker in 6 weeks. Life takes unexpected turns." That evening, I stood on the same beach where I had received Raymond's fateful call at 5 a.m. The ocean remained unchanged, vast, powerful, eternal. But I had changed. The woman who had stood here 6 weeks earlier, bracing herself for battle, had transformed into someone stronger, clearer, more purposeful. My phone rang. James calling from Atlanta. "Mom, you arrived safely." "Yes, the hotel is lovely as ever." "Good." He paused awkwardly. "Listen, I wanted you to know I'm starting real therapy next week, not just the court-mandated sessions. I need to understand why I was so vulnerable to manipulation, why I couldn't stand up to Vanessa." The admission represented significant growth. "That's an important step, James. I'm also taking that leave of absence from the firm, 3 months. I need to reassess everything, figure out who I want to be going forward." "That takes courage." "I learned it from watching you these past weeks, standing up against overwhelming odds, refusing to be erased." Another pause. "I never told you this, but even as a kid, I was in awe of your strength. I just never thought I had inherited any of it." "Strength isn't inherited, James. It's developed through challenge. You're facing yours now." After we disconnected, I continued my solitary walk along the shoreline. The confrontation that had begun with a 5 a.m. phone call had transformed into something I never could have anticipated, a renewal of purpose, a redefinition of identity, a reclamation of power. The next morning, I addressed a room full of judges, sharing both my personal experience and the systemic issues it illuminated. I spoke of the ease with which predatory individuals could manipulate guardianship systems, the importance of nuanced capacity assessments, and the voice that must be given to elders in all proceedings affecting their autonomy. A person's age should enhance their right to self-determination, not diminish it, I concluded. Their accumulated wisdom deserves respect, not dismissal, and their voices must be heard, not silenced. The standing ovation that followed was gratifying, but more meaningful were the judges who approached afterward, asking specific questions about implementing better protections in their courtrooms. Sarah Jenkins joined me for lunch, her judicial reserve giving way to genuine warmth. "You've started something important," she said. "William would be immensely proud." "I think he knew this would happen," I replied. "Not the details, perhaps, but the direction. He left me the tools I would need." "That sounds like William, always thinking 10 steps ahead." "What surprises me is how right it feels, not just defending myself, but creating something larger, something that will outlast me." Sarah nodded thoughtfully. "The best response to injustice has always been constructive action. You're building protection for countless others." That evening, I walked along the beach again, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and crimson. The horizon stretched infinitely, a visual representation of possibilities ahead. The old adage about turning lemons into lemonade seemed inadequate for what had transpired. This was more profound, transforming an attempt at exploitation into a movement for protection, converting personal violation into communal empowerment. As darkness fell, I made my way back to the hotel. Tomorrow I would return to Atlanta, to my apartment at Magnolia Heights, to the growing initiative that now gave shape to my days. But tonight, I would honor this moment of completion and commencement. In my suite, I uncorked a bottle of champagne, the same vintage William and I had shared on our honeymoon decades earlier. I poured a single glass and raised it toward the moon-silvered waves visible through the window. To unexpected journeys, I toasted aloud, and to the strength we never know we possess until it is tested. The champagne tasted of celebration and possibility. At 67, I had discovered a new beginning rather than an ending. The 5 a.m. call that was meant to herald my diminishment had instead announced my renaissance, and I was ready for whatever came next.